One of the reasons winter sowing works is because of the nature of the seed. This seed is a dicot, meaning it has two parts. Grasses are monocots, they just have one part. They don't have a seed coat that breaks in the same way. And that little squirrel, snaky type thing in the middle is the embryo. That's the part that actually grows, sends the roots and the shoots. And the white part surrounding it is what provides the nutrition for the newly germinating plant. And the dark pink edges that you can see there is the seed coat. And the seed coat is what regulates when seeds germinate. And many seeds need particular conditions. Some of them need to be in the cold for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. Some of them need to be, well, I think the thing that they all share in common is they all need to have moisture. Some of them need 2 years to germinate. They need to go through 2 hot and cold cycles. So it's the seed coat that determines when something germinates, when Mother Nature has figured out how to do that. So what are the many reasons I winter sow? In the wintertime when it's dreary and it's nice to be thinking about, I've usually ordered seeds by then, and it's nice to be able to do something more active. And when I mentioned that some seeds need to be exposed to the cold for certain amounts of time, 30, 60, or 90 days. I used to try to do that in my refrigerator, which you can do, and we have a fellow here who very successfully does that. But I just wasn't that good about keeping track of when it was done and could be brought out into the warmer temperatures. And so I find this is just kind of a no-brainer. You prepare the greenhouses and then you put them outside, and when it's time, and they know what to do. It's a lot cheaper. When I buy my native wildflowers, they're $3 a packet. And so for $3, I can have innumerable amount of plants. So if you're looking for bigger volume, then that's the way to go. It's a lot cheaper. You're probably, with a lot of plants, you're going to pay $10 or $15 each for one plant, depending on where you go and what you're buying. And I just love watching seeds germinate and plants grow. So that's certainly an attraction for me. Probably the main reason I was interested initially in winter sowing is because I would sow plants, seeds inside. I have a multi-purpose room, which is my sunroom, my dining room, and my plant room. And I would pot up the seeds in my multi-purpose room. And then when they germinated and it was warm enough, I'd take them outside, and then I'd take them in, and then I'd take them out. And this just totally cuts out that step. So I really appreciate that. And I don't have to keep track of anything, like I said before, because Mother Nature does that. I also learned in the process of doing it that it's a great family activity. When I was doing it the first time, my 11-year-old grandson, and you'll see a picture. This is my 11-year-old grandson who is drilling the holes in the bottom of the greenhouses, and my friend Cynthia is helping cut them. So we'll go back for a minute. Okay, and for those of us that are master gardeners, once a year we have something called a plant fest, where we have a plant sale and a lot of educational booths. And so the more plants I make, the more plants there'll be for Plant Fest. So what do you need for winter sowing? Well, I mean, yeah. There's not a lot of things. I'm going to share with you what I do, but it's certainly not the only way. I use a drill to drill holes in the bottom of the jug. And then you need tape. I use a box cutter to start the cut around the jug. And then for the rest of the way around, well, I should explain first. Do you want to go to? Yeah. So these first two jugs are example. The translucent one works beautifully. The opaque one doesn't work because it doesn't, they don't get enough light in there. So, so you take these jugs and I always punch the holes first because I learned that if you don't, there isn't enough structure to hold the jugs together after you cut them. So putting the holes in first is pretty important to me. And then once I have a start of a cut with a box cutter, I cut it with a scissor because I find when I use a box cutter all the way around, it's like this. It's very uneven, which is okay, but I prefer, it's much easier to match it up if it's a more even cut. And then I use markers and labels. And so Nancy's holding up an example of a prepared jug that is ready to be for soil to go into it. And watering is a really, what? Oh, thanks, Ann. Watering is a really important key. I'll talk about that in just a minute. A lot of people say, well, what size drill bit do you use when you drill the holes? Not important. I know people that have taken a knife or a pick or something and just punched holes. That works. Keep it easy on yourself if you have any kind of container. In addition to milk jugs, there are a lot of other kinds of containers that people use. Some people use those big clear plastic salad bins and winter sowing that. Some people, I've heard people that will take a pot, put soil in it, put the seeds in it, put saran wrap over it, punch holes in it, and do that. The only thing I ask you to consider when you're doing the alternative types of greenhouses is that you allow for plant growth up. You know, when they're seeds, it's okay to be flat on the surface, but not when they're starting to germinate. You're going to get mangled plants.
And Mary, there's 6 holes.
Again, the number of holes isn't real important either. That's, but that's what I do. Yeah. So she showed you the prepared jug. Oops. So when it comes to filling the greenhouses or the prepared jugs, first of all, you have to figure out, it's helpful to do that ahead of time, to figure out what seeds you want to sow. What I actually do is once I've identified my seeds, I go ahead and make a label for each kind of seed to put inside the jug. I use a seed starting mix as opposed to a soil mix. That's been really important because most soil mixes have a lot of added fertilizers, and that doesn't work for baby plants. They've got all the nutrition they need in their seed. And if you give them too much fertilizer, they're likely to grow really tall and crazy, and that isn't what you want. So this is the particular, I'm not endorsing it, but I've found it worked very well. This Coast of Maine seed starter is really good for my use anyway. And then once I and you want it 3 to 4 inches. You don't want to put, an inch of soil in something, ideally, because you're trying to encourage good root growth. And if they only have an inch to grow, they can't grow as much and as well. And so once I get my soil in the greenhouse, I immerse it in water, and I just use a dish pan or anything I've got around and fill with water and put the jug in there, because seed starting mix has, in most cases, I hope we find an alternative at some point in the near future, but in most cases, they have a lot of peat moss. And peat moss does not absorb water very well. It holds it well, but it doesn't absorb it very well. So I let it sit for, I don't always pay attention to how long, 15 minutes, half hour, overnight, doesn't really matter, to make sure that the water gets absorbed up. Because that's going to be your main watering source all winter long. Okay, so then once you've got your soil moist and you've got your label in there, so you know what you've planted in there, then you sprinkle the seeds on top. And generally, some seeds require light to germinate. And so mostly that's little tiny seeds. If you've ever done columbine or cauliflower or celery or those kinds of seeds that are really tiny, just put them on the surface and don't cover them. Otherwise, the rule of thumb for covering seeds is about the depth of the seed is big. So pumpkin seed would be, you'd plant that deeper than some other kind of a smaller seed. And then for the seeds that do not need light to germinate, then I put a thin sprinkling of soil potting seed starting mix on top of that. And then because I know, and one thing I didn't mention is after I've soaked it in the water, I put it up, you can see an example there. I put it up on a pot or something so it can drain, because I want it to be wet but not sopping. That too much moisture can kill some seeds. So finding that right balance. So then once I've put the seed starting mix on top for those where it applies, then I take a spray bottle and spray it to make sure that the top is as moist, because you put new soil in there, which hasn't been moistened. So I spray that, and then it's time to close up the jug. So
I ask a question.
you have a question? Okay.
So if you have a larger seed, you just put it down, you bury it. With the smaller, you put on top, and then you put the dirt on top.
You can do it that way. I just put them all on the top,
Okay.
and then put more for the larger seeds. I might put a quarter to a half inch of soil on top. Again, one of the beautiful things about this is it doesn't have to be perfect, because Mother Nature knows what to do. Yeah.
Seeds do you actually put in?
Good question. It depends. It depends somewhat on the size, because if you've got little seeds and it's a packet of 250 seeds, you could easily use 250 seeds. You don't want to, unless you know that it's a seed that doesn't germinate. Most packets will tell you what the germination rate is. If it's got a real high germination rate, fewer is better, so that plants have more room to get started. And it kind of depends on how many seeds, how many plants you want too. If you want 50 penstemon, then plant 60 or 70 seeds, or just, roughly guess it. If you want 3 plants, you maybe plant 10 seeds at the most. So that's what it depends on. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna maybe ask later, but the,
Wait, if we're asking questions, I'm supposed to
well,
ask.
talk about soil. Is that a good time now or?
Sure.
Yeah. So I've moved completely away from peat. I think I've never used peat because of its terrible wetting.
Yes.
And so what I've done is,
Looks like he's trying to adjust it back there.
which I'm pretty loud.
That's back, they told me.
I'm pretty loud, so I'll just speak. So what I've done is I switched to quiet, or whatever it's called. And it really wets so much better. And it's not active. It's quiet. It's COIR. It's coconut husk.
Yeah.
I've been doing that now for 4 or 5 years. You buy it in little bricks and wet it. And then I add perlite and vermiculite. So I make all my own, and it's a damn sight cheaper too. Tell you than buying seed starter. Seed starter is terribly expensive. So I just make all my own.
Ratio do you use?
About 1 to 1 to 1. A small amount, very fine compost. So I do get that, and I just mix the. Oh, and it works really well.
I'm glad to hear that because I've read some research on it and saying they don't really have a good equivalent for the current seed starting mixes, but
That works.
I'm sure that's improving all the time.
That works.
Yeah, that's great. I
No.
applaud you for that.
No, it doesn't fit in, and it wets very easy.
Yes, it
That's
does.
the peat problem. The peat's very acid, so then you have to add lime.
There's some odd acid
Or,
too.
yeah. If it's properly watered stuff. So if you get a good quality one, it's not a problem.
Well, that would be an interesting experiment for those of you that haven't done it before, to do one with the seeds,
Yeah.
official seed starting mix and one with the core and see how that works.
Yeah.
And what is that called?
Huh?
COIR?
COIR.
COIR?
Coconut.
Coconut.
Amazon.
You can buy, when you buy, sometimes you may have seen those little discs that have a little plastic wrapping it kind of around them, and you put it in water and it gets bigger. That's what that is. That's core.
So they come in bricks, like a brick. That makes about 4 or 5 bricks, I think, 3 to 4 brick size amount.
Where'd you get yours at?
Where do I get it? I get mine via Amazon, so. You can buy big blocks, but it's hard to mix with you. The bricks are deal.
The big bricks take 5 gallons of water to,
Yeah, the brick size is good.
yeah, I've used that for plants. I haven't used it for seeds. That's,
Yeah.
gave me a new idea. Thanks.
Is the compost that you're adding have to be sterile?
It's a good idea, but
I doubt it. I get the compost, because I do compost now, I get compost from them, so it's, but I've also used a compost that I've had delivered and it's been fine. So I haven't had a big issue with composts giving issues. But I'm not using very much. I just want to get them a little bit of food, but I want not, like you said, not too much. If you give them too much food, they won't form roots. And you really want good roots. Yeah.
well, with the commercial compost, like compost now, they heat their piles to 160 degrees, which kills pretty much everything. So I wouldn't worry about that. If you use your own compost, it would be a good idea to sterilize it because seeds are very vulnerable when they first germinate, and mold, and you don't want that to happen after all your work.
Stick it in the oven.
Yeah, you can do that. Although it gets rid of some of the benefits of compost, but you can't have everything. So, so once we've got a completed jug filled with seed starting mix and seeds, then you close the lid, tape it up, And I have tried over my years of various, many kinds of tape to hold it shut. And I have come to the conclusion that for my purposes, painter's tape works the very best. I initially tried packaging tape, the clear stuff. Man, that's tough to work with. It's tough to get off. Same thing with duct tape. Paper tape didn't last long enough. So painter's tape works, can get through a whole season with being intact and is easy to put on and easy to get off. So that's what I use. So then once I have my jugs all complete, this is a fence for my garden, my vegetable garden, and I line up all the jugs along the fence in the sun. And then the only thing I have to do through the winter is check to make sure that there's condensation inside the jug. If you don't see any condensation, you may want to take a spray bottle, put it in the top and spray around a little bit because it probably doesn't have enough.
How much sun does it need?
How much sun does it need? Well, when there's seeds, it doesn't matter. But when they start to germinate, it depends upon what kind of plants you're seeding. Because of the shade plants, something you'd plant in the shade doesn't need as much sun. You can move those into a partial sun or a shady area, but the full sun ones should be in full sun.
Let me bring you the microphone. Let me mention, we're being live streamed to Passmore. So we need to have you talk into the microphone. And I need my exercise.
I had a question. Do you completely seal the top? So do you put the cap on the jug? Does it need to be a completely enclosed system?
You throw the cap away.
So you
that-
can be open.
Mm-hmm. And it just seems like that's dangerous to do in the winter, but it works. So the first year I was really ambitious and I had a lot of seed and I thought, I'm going to use this seed whether it comes up or not. I want it out of my storage. So I planted 100 jugs. And since then, I learned my lesson. Since then, I've planted 50. I can keep up with 50 jugs. 100, I couldn't keep up with. So I guess that means I've winter sowed about 200 jugs at this point and getting ready to do it again. One of the things that is just a little detail that I've found in the process of doing it is once you put your seeds in and spray down the top, when I flip over the cover, I usually wipe around the outside because inevitably I get some water outside and then the tape isn't going to stick so well, or there might be some dirt left over. So I just take an old rag and wipe it around where I'm going to put the tape. Okay, I think one of the things, because I have a large number of jugs and because I like to go peek in them almost every day, once they start germinating, I make two rows. I'll have one row that are already germinated and one row that aren't. So that way I don't have to check every jug every day and keep rechecking the ones that germinated. That's just something I do. One of the hardest things to do when you do this the first time is to trust Mother Nature. Seeds can freeze, it's okay. Even in the 30s and into the 20s, the most germinating plants can weather that because of their little microclimate that's in their greenhouse. But if it gets much colder than that, if it gets down into the low 20s or the teens, I will actually throw something over them overnight to make sure that those new seedlings are protected enough. Then in the spring, and I never really know exactly when things are going to germinate, That's one of the things about planting a lot of jugs, because you might have a lot of seedlings that need attention right away. So when the seedlings have, I might have mentioned this already, when they have their first set of true leaves, the first leaves are the cotyledons, and you can't tell most plants initially when the cotyledons are there. But when you've got the first set of leaves, true leaves, then they can be either potted up or put in the ground if the weather allows. Okay, so here are examples of some jugs that have germinated and that, well, that's the other thing. Once they germinate, you take the tape off and you let them be exposed to more sun, because when they're actively growing like that, they need more sun than just the greenhouse. So this one on your, let's see, your left is an example of something that probably got left a little too long. Those roots are probably going to be hard to untangle. So when I get a situation like that, which I've had some, when you try to take it out of the container, it comes out as one chunk of dirt and roots. And one of my favorite tools for this situation is a fork. I've gone to resale stores and bought a lot of forks to help separate the roots very carefully and not damage them. And if I can't do that, then I have two choices. I can either plant that whole thing in the ground as it is and let them duke it out for survival of the fittest, or I can if I can possibly break that dirt chunk into smaller pieces, I can plant it in a bigger pot and wait for a couple weeks, a month, and go back and buy that, because being in a bigger pot, it's allowed its roots to grow out more and they're easier to separate at that point. I've done both of those things. Okay, let's talk about one of the big questions is, so what can I winter sow? And let's go over some examples. Most herbs can be winter sown. On this list, I'm not going to read the whole list, but borage, chamomile, and dill are annuals, not perennials, but they can be winter sown because when you have things that reseed in your garden, that's something that's a candidate for winter sowing, because those seeds have dropped and they've lasted all winter and now they're germinating. So those kinds of things are candidates. The rest of those things are perennials. Vegetables for winter sowing. Warm season vegetables are generally, you can winter sow them, but I don't generally, because the tomatoes and the squashes and the peppers, I've known people that have winter sown them and then they got too big to leave the tops on, so they took the tops off, and then at night they froze. So I don't winter sow my warm season vegetables, but all cool season vegetables can be done. All the garlics and onions, the arugula, the various greens, the brassicas, the cabbage and kale and mustard and all those. Celery, celeriac, chard. So you can see the list. I have a couple of them, or 4 of them marked: the beets, the carrots, the peas, and the radish, because I do not winter sow them, because I generally I seed them directly into the ground. And I can't imagine, I know people have done it, but I can't imagine trying to separate carrot seedlings and then put them in the ground. So I don't winter sow those particular ones. Flowers. A lot of flowers can be winter sown. Anything that's a perennial can be winter sown. When you look in your yard and you see those bachelor buttons that come up year after year, or those love and miss that come up year after year, those are good candidates for winter sowing. Well, I mentioned earlier about the ones that require stratification. They're good candidates for winter sowing. If you look on the package, seed package, and it says plant some amount of weeks before last frost, those can be winter sown. And almost all your native and wildflowers can be winter sown. So, because that's how Mother Nature does it. So does anybody have any questions about what can be winter sown? That gives you some examples. Okay, so what did I learn? Most of this came after the first year that I did it. I learned a lot, including that 100 jugs is too much. It's not too much to sow, it's too much to manage the plants in the spring. I mentioned not so many seeds in one jug. Oh, you can also use clear plastic jugs. They work fine in terms of being a greenhouse. However, I have found that like soda bottles or clear plastic like that squirter bottle, I found when I went to punch holes in the bottom, they were bears. So I'm staying away from clear plastic just because it's too hard to drill holes. Yeah.
Did it get burned? Clear plastic?
Sunburned, if do the plants get sunburned if they're in clear plastic?
I have never had that happen. Like I have used those clear plastic lettuce containers. And someone mentioned earlier, if you put the cover on, that's not going to give it enough room to grow. That's true. At least I wouldn't want to do that. But if you take another one and put it on top and tape it on, then that works. And I've never had any trouble with those burning. So. Okay. The last one, family and friend. It's a good bonding thing for family and friends. And when I was doing it the first year, my granddaughter was 3. And so what she could do was fill the prepared jugs with soil. She's 6 now. She can spread seeds, cover seeds. My 90-some-year-old mother-in-law, is virtually blind, but she can fill the containers. You know, if you've got an area where maybe some kind of bin or something, she can put the prepared jug in and pour the seed mix in it. So it's a nice family activity and you get something good from it. One of the things I've learned, because I have a lot of plants, I have to label each. At the time when I plant them in pots, which I do quite a bit, then I have to label each pot. Otherwise, down the road, I don't know what I've got. In the fall when they die back, I don't know what I've got. So I just recommend that. I happen to have official labels because I use them, but I know people that have cut up old blinds. You can use a popsicle stick, although they usually fade some. I haven't had very good luck with that. You can use the plastic silverware and write on that. So again, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. One of the things I didn't mention is at the time I taped the jug shut, I also write on the outside what the plant is and when I planted it. So That trouble is, I haven't found any really good marker that's can stand the ultraviolet light from the sun. So that often, not always, because you see some examples of ones I planted previously up here, but it often fades and then you don't know what you've got. So if you don't have a tag inside,
So there are some plant markers that are made for that purpose that
yes, there are.
that do work. Sharpies do not,
No, they do not, not even the extreme.
not extreme ones. So there are some that do work. And
I have not found them yet. Yeah, I would.
they're German or Japanese. I'm trying to remember what I think Stadler makes one as well.
Who?
I think Stadler makes one. STAE. That's a marker company. I think that's one of the ones that works.
Okay.
But there are particular ones that are made for that which do work and last for more than a year. Because I had the same problem, fading labels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have too, and I have bought some from Amazon that specifically say they're, for plant labels and they're ultraviolet resistant because I have had, the bad experience with Sharpies. And of course, just pencil works the best long term. I've even cut up yogurt containers, the big ones, and made steaks out of those when I was desperate because I needed a lot of labels. But I just wanted to say one thing, Mary, we were talking about the germination rate on packages, and I know you save a lot of native seeds and several of us have, but depending on the time that they're collected, they may or may not do as well. So, if you're doing something you got from a friend or your own garden, you might just want to plant it more thickly because you can always thin your seedlings.
Hey, I've got a question. The major problem that I had when I tried this,
Think a little bit more, Rebecca.
the major problem I had when I tried this was cleaning the bottles, the jugs after. Do you have a secret about that?
Well, my experience has been a jug can be used for 2 years. By that time, it's crumbling. Again, that UV. So when you pick it up and it falls apart, that's not too good. So the only thing I can really say about that is the sooner you clean it up after you empty it, the quicker, the easier it is. I've tried it all. I've tried to wait till the next season. That's really hard to get those clean. I have, one of the things that I do is in my planting area, I have a kid's swimming pool, the solid piece one. And I put them in there and let them soak. Sometimes I get the grandkids to come over and scrub them out for me. Let's see. Oh, I was going to mention, somebody mentioned, Julie, I think you might have mentioned pencil. I have experimented with different kinds of pencils. The wider, the bigger the lead, the better. I actually found the best success. I went to a art store and found an artist pencil that writes, you can see it. Most pencils are really kind of hard to see because they're light. And so that's what I'm using mostly at this point. Yeah.
A friend of mine uses a paint pen. So
A paint pen?
yeah. So I used to use them in the lab for liquid nitrogen thing, but they're a paint and they seem to stay on pretty well.
Okay.
I haven't tried that. I haven't tried it.
Can you get paint pens with real fine tips? Because most of them are pretty
That's the
big.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she writes on the pots, so.
Thank you. You mentioned keeping the jugs out in full sun, but sometimes in March we can get hot days and they could fry. So is part sun wiser maybe, or like morning sun? Otherwise you'd have to be mindful if they've germinated to open and it was getting hot to open the top, right? So they wouldn't boil.
I haven't had any problem with
You
that,
haven't,
but
okay,
I can see that is a potential problem.
okay.
Because
haven't-
inside the greenhouse, they don't get the same amount of ultraviolet light. That's why label in there works, because it doesn't get as much ultraviolet light to fade. So, yeah, I
Just
would
wonder about
certainly,
heat. Yeah,
yeah.
but if you have any problems, it's good to know.
Thank you. Yeah, I learned about this from Mary, like the first year she did it. So I've had a couple of years under my belt, but, and I love it. But I have found that, sort of what you're talking about, if it's in a full sun all day thing, like on my driveway, I might go ahead and take the tape off, and then I can either retape, or I could, once they're sprouted, you can just kind of lay the top back over and you still got a pretty good effect. And the other thing was, when I had it in an area that it's paved, but it has a little drain in the middle where it was really wet, and we got like 5 inches, and I had a lot of stuff sprouted. It soaked up so much water, I did start getting some rot, because I'm kind of I'm definitely a procrastinator about getting all those little pots clean to plant all the seedlings in, et cetera. So I've had some loss in that way.
I think maybe the reason I had better success in the sun is because I leave my pots on the ground, and the ground temperature in the winter, as it warms up, is cooler than the air temperature. And the opposite is true in the fall. So that may be why that worked. On a driveway, I can see that's going to absorb a lot more heat. Any other questions? Yeah.
I think I can speak loud enough. I am just curious about the schedule. I'm curious about the schedule. Is there any time when they should be planted? That's my question number one. My question number two is it always for transplanting, or is it something you take this pot and actually let it grow when after germination to maturity?
The first part of the question is timing. Are you talking about timing of the seedlings or the
Right,
planting of the
obviously,
seeds?
Obviously, we have to put different kind of plants in ground at different times.
Mhm.
The green vegetables require around March or late February or something. Tomatoes require after April 20th and all that. So if we start all of them at the same time and they have germinated, then some of them may become too big to actually handle. So my point is that to have this in the garden, do you start something first and then subsequently start, like tomatoes and peppers and all that, second installment, or you start everything at the same time?
No, I wouldn't start everything at the same time. Tomatoes, I wouldn't start before probably March. I tend to put my tomatoes in a little later, so you might start a little bit earlier, but I start mine in March. Some of the other things, and poppers, sunflowers. I think sunflowers probably could be winter sown because sometimes they self-sow. And so, yeah, I think depending upon the kind of seed, and you're talking, because there's a difference between cold season plants and warm season plants and what temperatures they can take. I have some new red fire lettuce that has been out. It reseeded itself in October, and so it's been growing since October. And I neglected to cover it when it was in the teens, and it's still growing. I'm surprised, but it's still growing. And I think part of it is that fact that in in the fall, the soil temperature is warmer than the air temperature. So the ground is going to be warmer and take care of those plant roots. Okay, what was the second part of your question?
For our area,
Yes.
for this area, for some of us who are not, who haven't lived here long enough, don't know too many details. Is there, like on your website or on our county website or NC State website, any timing that when they should actually be winter sowed? Now, I know there is a calendar for putting in the ground. I know I have access to that, but I have not seen any calendar when we should start winter sowing what.
Yeah, I haven't either. I'm familiar with the planting calendar that's on the NC website, NC State website, but I haven't seen anything for winter sowing. In a lot of ways, it's less picky. But you don't want, it's really the warm season vegetables that are the issue. And you would want to plant them in the ground, usually when the ground is about 50 degrees. And so I think it's more important to pay attention to the ground temperature and when that is. And, you know, as we all know, that's changing from year to year often. But I don't know that I can tell. I'm not familiar with a winter sowing calendar.
So for, flowers right now, we could put in January, we could start all of them. Like, we don't need to distinguish these flowers should be started later. Okay, so.
No.
Just start everything in January.
You wouldn't start tender annuals like, for example, impatiens. They aren't going to do well. But pretty much,
Perennial,
yeah, for sure perennials.
about wildflowers.
Mhm.
Okay, so
They grow all winter. So let's see if there's anything we haven't talked about. Just be patient, trust Mother Nature. Doesn't have to be perfect. I know that sometimes when I tape around the edge, the halfway mark, I miss a spot or the plastic shifts and there's a little gap. I just take another piece of tape and tape over it. It's just really doesn't have to be perfect. So those perfectionists out there, relax. One of the things, I'll say one more thing and then I'll get back to you. One of the things I have learned in germinating a lot of different kinds of plants is generally, I don't know that it's always true, but generally native roots grow a lot faster than other kinds of plants. So when I get ready to transplant them into a pot, I'm going to give them a bigger pot because their roots really get down there fast and develop fast. And I didn't always do that. You know, it takes more dirt and things like that. But I've found that when it starts to get hot and they're in a smaller pot, they're so tightly root bound that they can't accept the water that you pour on them. So the water just goes right through. They have to have some room to grow. So they can be transplanted earlier, smaller, and from the jugs to the germinating, the seedling stage, and bigger pot is better if you're using pots. Okay.
Yeah, I have one. I had the question we talked about earlier. So I've been doing stratification in the fridge for about 4 years, and as you say, you have to be organized and know what you're doing. And I mean, my 90-day stratification is already in the fridge, ready to go. One of the things I've found that I had problems with some species, native species, that didn't germinate very well. So now I'm trying winter sowing. So I'm doing a bit of comparison between winter sowing and wet sand stratification. So see if we can if there is a difference for those that are difficult, that I'm having difficulty with, it maybe that the winter sowing allows that. They get hot and colder temperatures, variations in temperatures. Maybe that's the key to some of these native plants to get them to germinate. So it's just an interesting question, which I don't know if anybody's looked into.
I'd love to hear the answer. Though one of the things I learned the first year I went to, I wanted to do a bunch of wildflowers and natives. So I went to Prairie Moon
Yep.
and ordered a bunch of seeds. And I generally have about 80% germination rate. So not everything germinates. And the second year I planted some more, and some of them just didn't come up. So I just kind of neglected them and left them in my garden in the jugs. And some of them germinated after a year and a half. So one of the things I'm very careful about now when I buy a seed, right at the point I am now, I'm not going to buy seeds that take 2 years to germinate. And some of the wild natives do. So I've eliminated that. So I just caution you to look at that if you don't want to wait for 2 years.
Well, my first experience of that was milkweed. I had some milkweed, the big one, the Syriaca. And the first year I planted those and nothing came up. And so I just put them in cold frame and left them all summer. And then the next spring, 100%.
Yep.
So maybe you just have to be patient.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. But most things germinate in the spring. That's been my experience. Any other? Okay. Let's see if there's anything else here I haven't already mentioned. One of the nice things about winter sowing is you can do it inside. I do it in my multi-purpose room. I take this old ugly tablecloth, put it on a table, get my jugs lined up, and do it inside. And then all I have to do is walk them outside when I'm done. So I don't have to sit out. I don't have a greenhouse or anything like that. So just walk them outside and leave them. I think we talked about those other things. Okay, I think one other thing related to the cleaning of the jugs that we talked about earlier is once I clean my jugs from that year, I'll put them in plastic bags because I have a garden shed that gets filthy and I don't want to have to go back and clean those jugs again in the spring. So I just stuff them. You can get about 8 jugs in a 13-gallon plastic bag. So I just put them there and then hang them from the rafters so they aren't in my way because they take up a lot of room. Okay, so this is the end result of my first year. If you plant a lot, you get a lot. So keep that in mind when you're starting. How many seeds you plant, how many different jugs you plant. So.
Order enough labels.
Yeah.
So you started them in the little jug,
Mhm.
and some things you take from the jug and stick it directly outside,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But then how do you decide whether you're going to stick them directly outside or whether you're going to put them in this before they go outside?
Well, I sell plants at the Eno River Farmers Market, so I will be keeping plants in pots. So sometimes I have to do a different bigger pot planting. That's the main reason I do put them in pots. Sometimes I like to put them in pots just to make sure they have a really good, I don't always have the best soil in my yard. So I want to make sure they have a really good root system before I put them in the ground too. That's the other reason.
Thank you.
Hey, any other questions?
So when you're putting them in pots, then you use potting soil?
Yes, that's when I use core. And my own compost. And I add a few other things, some worm poop and some biochar.
Okay.
So I make my own soil, but.
Okay.
Huh?
Some goat manure.
Goat meal. Okay, well, I do have a handout at the end of the table there, which summarizes the steps of winter sowing on one side, and on the other side is the things I learned from my first year.
Why don't we give those out at the door, Mary?
Okay. So if you want one of those, please feel free to take one.
And the seed packets.
Yes, and we have some flower seeds that are appropriate for winter sowing on the back table. So if you want to take some seeds with you, please do so. Give it a try. And I wish you all the best of luck with it.
Oh, yeah, just hang up here a minute. Well, Mary, thank you. This is, I'm always a terrific pleasure. I want to sing Mary's praises a bit. For those of you who are not master gardeners, she is an amazing volunteer with our program, and it would not be, the program would not be what it is today without Mary. Mary, as she said, she is a propagator and she does sell her things at Eno Farmers Market, but she is also head of the seed library at J.C. Ralston Arboretum. So Mary knows what she's talking about when she talks about seeds. Also, I want to mention, just to give a plug, we have our own seed library at Orange County Master Gardeners. But also, if you're a member of North Carolina Botanic Garden, they give a member seed giveaway. So it's a great benefit of belonging to NCBG. Also, if you're a member of J.C. Ralston Arboretum, which is NC State's Arboretum, they have a seed giveaway in the springtime. I think it's in March, isn't it? And many unusual plants are available in that seed giveaway. So great benefits for belonging to other organizations. We do have a couple, as always. Oh, yeah, let me look at this. We have, one of our members has donated 2 house plants. They're the same thing. Mary, come back here. You get to.
Oh, no, I know, I was just kidding.
Oh, okay. How did you say this one? Let's see. It's a houseplant, Syngonium podophyllum, and it is obviously tropical, and we have 2 of them. And apparently they get pretty large, so you have to keep pinching them.
And that could go to 443, last 3 numbers. No, 443? Okay.
Or you don't want a house plant.
438. Four, three, eight. Ready.
Okay, and another one for that. These came from Faye McNall.
445.
They would be very pleased.
And then we have one other thing. Oh, beautifully and indirect. I completed a couple days ago, winter sowing of kale seeds that I've collected from my yard for years. So it's really does well in this climate. I actually, the first time I planted it, I used some kale and then it went to seed. And then the year later, I went back and the darn thing had seeded itself and was growing again. So it's a very reliable kale. And I planted it Tuesday. It should be up in probably a couple more days. I have not put it outside. It can certainly go outside. So we can give that away too. 437.
Grow some vegetables. She has a lot of shade, right?
He'll give the fried chicken.
Getting pale?
Yes.
Oh, whoa.
Okay.
And, oh, you should take that off. Leave it alone.
Oh, okay.
And Ann Snodgrass very kindly donated one of our calendars. And if you have not seen this, it is quite amazing. It's our first year of our Master Gardener calendar. It's ecological gardening. And I mean, you will know when National Wildflower Day is and all kinds of fun facts in here, as well as a lot of educational information. And
So that is 426.
there you go. All righty. And Mary has, as I mentioned before, she's doing our January lecture, January 16th, which is a Thursday, 3:30 to 5, planting for our changing weather. Do you want to say a couple words?
Well, we all know because we just were upgraded from 7B, growing area 7B to 8A, that things, yeah. So things are getting warmer.
Oh, really?
And so one of the things we're seeing along the way is things are getting, some plants aren't making it. Some plants are becoming more invasive. Some plants aren't there at the right time to feed the wildlife that needs them. So my talk will be an attempt to give you practical suggestions for how to deal with growing plants in the changing climate.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll see you in January.
Oh, so where are we going?
We have to.
I could help but no.